Finish, Mark. Let's just be done.
we took the first half of Mark nice and methodically. We'll just rush through the rest of it. It's all academic at this point anyway.
Yes, we get it. As long as if we read it.
Let's just listen to the rest of it.
Blah blah blah.
No
Jesus
commentary.
alive. Blah blah blah.
You got it from here. Yeah, so we're gonna do the first half of chapter 8 today. Even if it goes short, I'm not going to do the second half because, like I said, I don't have my notes written up for them. So yeah, I can't go on. That being said, the first half of Mark really is it really is set up for what's about what is about to happen. So we're in the middle of the gospel, right? I don't think I would call this the climax of the story. That's obviously going to be like the passion, like towards the end, like that's the climax of the story. But we really are at a high point, and that's going to be especially evident next chapter when we get to the transfiguration, right? Because we've been talking about how the through line through Mark is this question of who is Jesus, and literally when we start off the second half of Mark, it's going to start off with Jesus asking that question: who am I? Like, who do people say that I am? Right? And that's going to go through a series of really interesting interactions with Jesus and Peter. And then it's going to culminate in chapter 9 with the transfiguration, which is another really interesting interaction with Peter. And we're going to talk about all of that. So these first couple of sections in Mark 8 are kind of wrapping up the things that happened in the last few chapters and putting them all together and really squaring that question of who is Jesus. And we're going to start off with a story that is basically a repeat of a story that we already had.
Chapter 8. In those days, when again a great crowd had gathered, and they had nothing to eat, he called his disciples to him and said to them, I have compassion on the crowd, because they have been with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way. And some of them have come from far away. And his disciples answered him, How can one feed these people with bread here in this desolate place? And he asked them, How many loaves do you have? They said, 7. And he directed the crowd to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. And they set them before the crowd. And they had a few small fish. And having blessed them, he said that these also should be set before them. And they ate and were satisfied. And they took up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full. And there were about 4,000 people. And he sent them away. And immediately he got into the boat with his disciples and went to the district of Dalmanutha.
Okay. So this is basically the same story, just a couple of the details slightly different.
So it's a different account of the first story.
Right, exactly. So you could take that route,
Obvious.
but that would be dumb because in a few more sections, Jesus is going to reference both of these stories separately. There's 4,000 this time around instead of 5,000. Again, you have the reference to a desolate place. He doesn't hammer it home this time and say the word 4 or 5 times like he did last time, but it's still there. He has 7 to start off with. So last time it was 5 loaves and 2 fish making 7. This time it's just 7 loaves and we kind of don't know how many fish. The fish are a little bit of an afterthought on this one, but there's still a large remainder. This time, 7 baskets, whereas last time there were 12 baskets. Jesus has people sit down again. It doesn't say that he divided them up by groups like last time, but you can assume that maybe that happened. You also have that you have a little bit of that interaction of what do you have again, right? That same interaction, but a little bit different. He's not one. It's not 100% clear in this one whether or not he thinks it's their responsibility. Like last time, he straight up tells them, "Well, you guys go feed them." This time, he's not as blunt about like, "Well, it's your responsibility to go feed them," but it's still implicitly there because he asks, "What do you guys have?" So, like, what tools are at your disposal to go and deal with this issue? I want to read so about the interaction between well, like why aren't the number of fish listed? The enduring word says they needed to see that they were safe giving everything to Jesus. Why were these not mentioned before? Could it be that it had been withheld by the doubting disciples until they saw how the bread was multiplied? Apparently, the fishes were blessed separately and then distributed as the bread had been. Like
They already saw it happen, though, didn't they?
yeah, like that seems weird. Like we don't have any mention of like them like doubting. Yes, they already saw it happen once. There does seem to be something about like, well, how could they come up with this idea of how can one feed all these people with bread here in this desolate place? They already saw them. So there is a level of like they are doubting or they are, but also it could be like you're gonna get loose with the term disciples here because maybe like it's a different set of disciples, right, or something like that. Because right, there's the 12, but we know that he has a wider set of disciples. It could be something like that that's going on. We don't know. We don't have any indicator as to what's really going on. My guess is that what's going on is that because he has that Jesus makes a reference to the loaves later, and he maybe wanted different numbers for them. Don't 100% know why, and liked having them start off with 7 both times. And so by numbering the fish, that maybe ruined the number for that. But maybe Mark wanted to keep the symbol or like the symbology of both bread and fish coming together. We talked about that last time, and so maybe he wanted to reference the fish again. I don't know. It's not clear. I don't think so. Yeah. So I don't think that there's meant to be a major significance. And yeah. And so this is so. What do I think is going on here? What I think is going on here in the story is that there's not supposed to be a major, like a lot of the commentaries, especially like the Enduring Word one, tried to like compare and contrast the two accounts and say like, oh, this one is slightly different and therefore it means like this extra thing or whatever. I don't think it means something extra. I think this story means the same thing as the last story. Why do I say that? Because I think that the point of saying the story twice is to show that it is a repeatable story. That's the whole point of kind of having the same story twice. Because what's going on, remember how I said that what's going on in the story is Jesus set up this competing system that's going to compete with the system of like man, right? And you still have this dynamic of they're outside, right? And they're far. We know that they're far away because it would take a 3 days journey for them to go back, right? So they're obviously not close, right? So you still have this. And so what's going on? Well, what's going on is he's setting up the church, right? He's intending for this to be a regular thing, that the disciples are constantly in charge of giving the people bread, right? Where the people are constantly giving them bread. And that bread is ultimately going to come from the source, right? Which is Jesus. It's supposed to be a regular event that's going on, okay? And it's supposed to be a picture of that. And so I don't think that we should really be comparing, contrasting, and trying to draw out some kind of meaning about the disciples acting differently this time versus last time. I think it's just there to say, like, sometimes what's going to occur is going to look differently, but the core of what's going to happen is going to be the same, because the core of what's going to happen is that, like, bread is going to come from Jesus, who you need to recognize as God, who they're not at this point. And we're going to discuss that a little bit more, even as it related to last time. But that this is going to be the system that's going to happen. People are going to come out of the systems that they're used to. They're going to come out of the systems of where they're at, and they're going to be looking for bread, the bread of life, right? They're going to be looking for Christ, and it's going to be the job of the disciples and the people that are working for him, for his church, to administer that back out to the people, right? And I think that that's what's going on here. One little note, Dalmanutha, nobody knows where that is. It's, everybody's pretty sure it's got to be something around the Galilean Sea, but there's no hard records for where that's
mine
at.
has a note that says some manuscripts say Magadan or Magdala.
Yeah, there's some people. Yeah, so if you've watched The Chosen, the first episode, Mary Magdalene is from that, and she's supposed to be from Magdala, which is maybe this city.
Well,
Who knows?
Magadan sounds a lot like MAGA country to me.
Okay.
Got it.
All right, we're gonna keep going.
The Pharisees came and began to argue with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven to test him. And he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, "Why does this generation seek a sign? Truly, I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation." And he left them, got into the boat again, and went to the other side.
Okay. So this little section is interesting to me because,
It's this short little thing. It's like, what?
it's a short little thing, but really, again, so like really what it's doing is it's setting up what's about to occur, right? This little like section is setting up the whole leaven of the Pharisees and Herod that's going to come after it. That's what the point of this is. I also think it's funny because it's very blunt in that he's just like, no sign will be given. But that's weird because Jesus has given signs. He just fed 4,000 people, right? He's given plenty of signs. Also, I said we're not supposed to do this, but if you go to the other Gospels, whenever he says something like this similar, it's changed, right? In Matthew, he says, there will be no sign for this wicked generation, except for the sign of Jonah, right? And the sign of Jonah is that like the Son of Man will be gone for 3 days and then come back, right? Which is supposed to be reference to the Passion story, right? And then in the Gospel of John, John very methodically lists 7 signs that Jesus does, right? And so like whenever he's performing miracles in John lists it like was the first sign of Jesus, and then like the next one's like this is like the next or like the second sign of Jesus or whatever. And he ends up listing 7. So like whenever he does the turning the water and wine at Cana, he's like this is the first sign of Jesus. And so it's kind of funny how you see them, but I think the point of this, right, is a point that I like and that I make a lot, which is that God is not a
Do you mean a different kind of sign?
So that, well, and so
They
there,
don't say what.
so